Hello students, today we'll be starting our new history chapter, which is Industrialization and Urbanization in America. The first chapter is called Chapter 1, The Industrial Giant. We start our Chapter 1 talking about a man by the name of Andrew Carnegie. Now, Andrew Carnegie was a Scottish man who had come to the United States with his younger brother, his mother, and his father. They had been very poor in their homeland of Scotland, and so he quickly had to get a job when they first moved to the United States. His first job was as a bobbin boy, where he was paid just $1.20 a week. But he quickly learned that he could teach himself new skills and taught himself how to be a telegraph operator. He also taught himself to do bookkeeping and got a job with the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. And at this time, he was able to earn about $35 a week. By the time Carnegie was about 33 years old, he had increased his salary to about $50,000 a year. Today, that would be about $500,000 that he was earning every year. He was a very smart and wise investor, and he was able to become a multi-millionaire by the year 1883. Now, at the same time in the United States, there were other people who were not doing as well as Andrew Carnegie. These were people who had been in low-paying jobs, who had not been doing very well in their industries. One example is Thomas O'Donnell, who had also come to America as a young boy and had worked in a textile factory. His life was very different to Andrew Carnegie because he was only earning $133 a year, and that's what he was using to help him pay for his family. Okay. There was a great change that was taking place during this period, and that is what we call industrialization, the production of goods by machines in large factories rather than by hand. So this change to industrialization did not happen overnight. In the United States, there was no exception. The first steps towards industrialization happened when George Washington was still president. Back then, nearly all Americans made everything by hand in their homes, just as their grandparents had done. Clothing was woven at home on a spinning wheel and not on a loom. And in Great Britain, there were some changes to how this was happening. Several people had invented machines that could spin cotton into thread, and then this thread could be woven into cloth. These were the beginnings of the industrialization, and we already talked about this in our industrialization unit earlier, but now we'll be talking about how it affected the United States. So British merchants were selling these textiles all over the world, and the United States wanted to find opportunities where they could bring those inventions to the United States. Now, at first, the British were keeping everything a secret, and they were trying to protect their inventions. But eventually, this secrecy did fail. And in 1789, when Washington became president, Samuel Slater was a 21-year-old worker in an English cotton mill. And he saw an ad in a newspaper that said that Americans wanted to pay handsomely anyone who could create for them a spinning machine. And he knew, even at the age of 14, when he had started working in factories, that he knew how to build a spinning machine. So he disguised himself as a farmer and boarded a ship for the United States. And then, along with himself and two other American partners, they created the first spinning mill in the United States. Over the next 2 decades, many more spinning mills sprang up in New England, anywhere where there was fast-flowing streams and rivers to give power to the machines. Now, in the beginning, the threads were the only things that they were making, but eventually they were able to also learn how to weave these threads in machines. And Francis Lau visited a weaving machine in Great Britain and figured out how to bring that technology to his factory in Boston. So now machines could spin the cotton into thread, then a worker would dye the thread, and then another machine would weave it into a cloth. Okay? This led to what we call the factory system arriving in the United States. By the 1820s and 1830s, factories were producing other types of goods as well. They could turn wheat into flour, they could turn trees into lumber, and they could create things like shoes or clocks or kitchen pots and pans in factories. In the beginning, most factories only worked with about 20 different people. Many people were still working on their farms at this time. However, after the Civil War is when the Industrial Revolution really began in the United States, and industrial growth was very rapid, and eventually the US overtook Britain in manufacturing goods. By 1850, the United States had become an industrial giant.